But when he released the statement, obviously he made reference to the fact that he continues to be a distraction for the brilliant work of the royal family. Well, the irony is he is continuing, even after giving up those titles, to be this humongous distraction for the royal family. You know, when we look at the events that...
A man is sitting across from a host. He's relaxed, famous, but not in the way you'd expect. Not a politician. Not an actor. A food critic. A man who has spent 25 years building a name for himself, one cookbook at a time. London. A podcast studio, no different from 100 others. A microphone. A question asked almost as a joke. And an answer that would not stay contained to that room. I want you to picture this moment carefully, because most people scrolled past it without understanding what they were actually looking at. And someone asks him a simple question. What if you were a prince? He laughs. But listen closely to what comes out of that laugh, because underneath it is something far more serious than a joke. He says it would be the quickest way to revolution. He says the gates of Buckingham Palace would be stormed. Stop there for a second. That is not the language of a man flattered by the idea of a crown. That is the language of a man who has thought about this far more than he's letting on. Because here is what you need to understand before we go any further. This man is not some distant cousin, 12 names down a line of succession nobody bothers to read. This is Queen Camilla's son. His name is Tom Parker Bowles. And the question he was just asked, half as a joke, is one of the most loaded questions you could ask anyone connected to the British monarchy right now.
Very nice to meet you.
Well, we go back a long way with food.
We do indeed. You are my first boss. You gave me my first. I've literally for the last 3 weeks been talking about the book, obviously banging on about royal food and the rest of it. And every question starts, how did your food writing career, how did your career start? So I tell them the same story.
Tell us, 24 years ago, what happened?
24 years ago, good God. It was at a party in 2000. I think I was slightly merry, and I spotted you across the room. You'd just become editor of Tabloid.
Born in December of 1974, in London. Raised in the English countryside, first at a manor house in Wiltshire that he has described as something close to haunted. Educated at Eton. The son of Camilla and her first husband, Andrew Parker Bowles, which makes him stepson and godson to the King of England. Let that settle for a moment. A man who grew up inside the orbit of the most famous family on earth. A man whose mother now wears a crown. A man who, by nothing more than circumstance and bloodline, sits closer to royal power than almost anyone alive who doesn't actually hold a title. And when offered the chance, even hypothetically, to step into that power, he doesn't hesitate. He refuses it. Publicly. On record. And not for the first time. Here's a question I want you to sit with for a second, and I genuinely want to know your answer. If you were one decision away from becoming royalty, would you take it, or walk away? Tell me in the comments. Yes or no. That's all I need from you right now. Because the answer Tom Parker Bowles gives, in his own words, is more complicated than a simple yes or no. And the timing of when he gives it matters more than you'd think.
Very much for joining me, Tom, and very excited to have a discussion with you. And I'd really like to get into talking to you about a food writer, being a journalist, and some of the current situation with information that the consumer is receiving and where you see things possibly going in the future. But first of all, I'd just like to sort of ask a very open-ended question regarding regenerative agriculture. How much do you think people understand about it currently, and where do you think it's going?
This wasn't some quiet afternoon, free of context. This conversation happened while the monarchy itself was under a different kind of pressure entirely. While questions about royal titles, who deserves them and who should lose them, were already burning through the British press for reasons that had nothing to do with food, or podcasts, or Christmas dinners at Sandringham. Tom Parker Bowles chose this exact moment to draw his line. And once you understand why, the joke stops sounding like a joke at all. Because somewhere underneath the laughter, underneath the talk of revolution and storming gates, is a man who has spent 2.5 decades deliberately staying outside the one door everyone assumes he'd want to walk through. The question isn't whether he was offered a crown. The question is why a man with everything to gain keeps saying no. And to understand that, we have to go back. Past the podcast. Past the cookbooks. Past the coronation where his own son carried the train of a queen.
Because what the regular listeners and viewers will know, before coming on, you answer a little questionnaire, food loves, food hates, and given your job, it was detailed, to say the least. I mean, some people, it's like a one-word answer, like, no, yes, hate this. What do you not like?
Back to where this distance between Tom Parker Bowles and the institution he was born beside actually began. That's where the real story starts. 25 years. That's how long Tom Parker Bowles spent building something with his own hands before he ever touched the word royal in his professional life. Think about that number for a second. 25 years. Most people don't stay disciplined about anything for 25 years. Not diets. Not promises. Not grudges. But Tom Parker Bowles stayed disciplined about distance. Because here's what almost nobody outside his world understood until he said it himself. There was a moment, a real moment, where he could have used his mother's name to launch his entire career overnight. He didn't. He started as a junior publicist. Not glamorous. Not royal. A desk job at a public relations firm in London, doing the unglamorous grind that has nothing to do with palaces or titles. Then food writing. Then restaurant reviews. Then a column. Then another. Brick by brick, with no shortcut, no royal seal stamped on the cover to fast-track his name into bookstores. And the entire time, the question followed him anyway. Nepotism. He's heard the word so many times he can say it without flinching now. He's even said it to journalists directly, almost daring them to bring it up first. I know full well, he said. Nepotism, blah, blah, blah. Fair game. Listen to that response again. He's not denying the connection. He's not pretending his mother isn't the queen. He's doing something far more interesting. He's owning the conversation before anyone else can use it against him. Because here's the detail that changes everything. For 25 years, he kept his career and his bloodline in 2 separate rooms. Until October of 2024. That's when he finally let them meet. A book. Cooking and the Crown. 200 years of royal recipes, from Queen Victoria all the way to King Charles III. This was the first time Tom Parker Bowles let the royal name walk directly into his work. And he knew exactly what that would cost him. He said it plainly. If I'd come in at the start and said, this is going to be the exclusive royal family cookbook, that would have been a sellout. So he waited. He built credibility the hard way first. And only then, decades later, did he allow the 2 worlds to touch. That is not the behavior of someone chasing royal status. That is the behavior of someone protecting something else entirely. His own name. Separate from hers. But here's where the story gets harder to look at directly. Because the disciplined, careful man writing about royal banquets in 2024 is not the same young man we find if we go back far enough. There's a version of Tom Parker Bowles that existed before any of this. Before the cookbooks. Before the coronation. Before the careful image management. And here's the one who told us about it. Not a tabloid. Not a leak. Him. Cannes, 1999. He was a young man, decades before any of the Polish, caught in a sting operation involving an undercover reporter posing as a wealthy sheikh. He has called it exactly what it was. A setup. The fake sheikh, he calls it now, with the kind of dry distance that only comes after enough time has passed to survive the memory. Cocaine was involved. The story ran. his name, his mother's name, all of it dragged through headlines while he was still a young man with no protective layer of royal connection shielding him from public judgment.
Publicist. And I quite like food. So I don't know why, in some fit of inspiration, I totted up to you and said, would you like a food column? And you said, okay, give me 800 words, we'll think about it. And it was about prep school food. I remember that wonderful cartoonist you had. Was he called? It wasn't Banks, it was Springs. And it was about the horrors and
This wasn't a prince caught in scandal. This was a private citizen, with a famous mother, learning in the most painful way possible what it feels like when the press decides your private life is now public property. And it didn't stop there. Before the headline settled, he was already somewhere else entirely. Working for one of the most notoriously difficult men in Britain. Mohammed Al-Fayed. Tom has described those years in his own words. Terrifying. Horrible. 2 words. No embellishment needed. Imagine that for a moment. A young man, already carrying the weight of a public scandal, walking every day into the presence of an employer he describes using language that blunt. This is the part of the story most people never hear because it doesn't fit the image. It's easier to picture Tom Parker Bowles as he is now. Composed. Successful. Comfortable on television panels, judging cooking competitions, writing for glossy magazines. But comfort like that doesn't appear out of nowhere. It gets built. Slowly. Often out of exactly the kind of difficult years nobody wants to talk about. So here's the real question buried underneath all of this. How does a man with a tabloid scandal and a brutal early career end up, decades later, trusted enough to write the official culinary history of the British monarchy? The answer isn't complicated. It's something his own family taught him long before any of this happened. His mother has a phrase for it. You have to laugh. Tom has talked about this directly. He says it's the thing that kept Camilla going through every difficult chapter of her life. The ability to laugh even when the moment doesn't deserve laughter. He describes the family pulling together during hard times like Roman centurions. Shields up. Formation tight. Facing outward together instead of turning on each other. That image stayed with him. It shaped him. And it explains something important about the man we met at the very beginning of this story. The one who joked about revolution. The one who laughed off the idea of a crown like it was nothing. That laugh isn't nothing. That laugh is a survival skill, 25 years in the making. By May of 2023, the distance and the connection finally sat side by side in the same room, in the most visible way possible. At the coronation of King Charles III, Tom's own son, Freddie, walked as a page of honor to Queen Camilla. A grandson, carrying the train of a crown his father has spent his entire adult life choosing not to want for himself. 2 generations. 2 very different relationships with the same institution. And that's the story underneath the joke we opened with. Tom Parker Bowles isn't avoiding the crown because he fears it. He's avoiding it because he has watched, his entire life, what that crown costs the people who carry it. The scrutiny. The lack of privacy. The permanent surrender of an ordinary life. He chose food instead. He chose 25 years of building something nobody could call inherited. And when the question comes up again, as it always does, he already knows his answer. But here's what I need you to understand before we leave this story behind. The conversation around royal titles in Britain right now is far from finished. There is another member of this family whose position is being quietly discussed in rooms most of the public will never see. And unlike Tom Parker Bowles, this person hasn't said no. That's where we go next. Fired. That's the word Tom Parker Bowles used about himself. Not a tabloid. Not an unnamed source. Him, in his own words, years later, looking back without flinching. I was really bad at every job I did after university, he said. And I was fired most of the time. Sit with that for a second. This is a man who grew up in a 700-year-old manor house. Eton. Oxford. Every door theoretically open to him before he even walked through it.
Well, I think obviously that regenerative agriculture is an incredibly important movement, if not the most important movement. I think people on the whole are beginning to realise the horrors of intensive farming, the short-term profit, but the long-term devastation that the continued cycle of pest.
And he still couldn't keep a job. Picture him in his early 20s. No cookbooks yet. No television panels. Just a young man, freshly out of Oxford, trying to make his way through a string of positions he couldn't hold on to. Public relations first. A film publicist role at a PR firm in London. It didn't last. Here's what makes this detail so important. His mother was already one of the most photographed women in Britain by this point. If there was ever a moment for nepotism to quietly step in and rescue a struggling young man, this was it. It didn't happen. No phone call smoothed things over. No royal connection materialized to save his career. He kept failing, on his own, in full view of an industry that would have loved nothing more than to write about the Queen's son losing yet another job. So what finally worked? Food. Not a famous family recipe. Not some inherited culinary dynasty. Just an honest, almost accidental realization. He put it simply. Food is the one universal experience apart from death. You can be celibate. You can avoid drinking. You can even dodge your taxes. But everyone has to eat. That line is doing more work than it sounds like at first. Because what he's really saying is this. Food was the one subject where his name meant nothing, and his actual ability meant everything. For the first time, nobody could call it nepotism. Restaurants don't care whose son you are. A badly written review reads the same no matter your bloodline. So he built something there instead. Slowly. Job after job, magazine after magazine, until food editor positions and restaurant critic bylines started attaching themselves to his name instead of failure. And it's worth pausing here, because this detail tends to get lost in every retelling of his story. The most successful chapter of his career didn't begin with privilege. It began with getting fired enough times that privilege clearly wasn't going to save him. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because years later, that same hard-won expertise in food would lead him somewhere extraordinary. Somewhere that would finally let his two worlds, the private career and the royal bloodline, sit in the same room together. It started with a coronation. May 6, 2023. Westminster Abbey. The moment King Charles III was officially crowned, with Camilla beside him as Queen. A flawless, ceremonial, exhaustively planned day. Except for one detail almost nobody noticed until Tom explained it himself. There was no garlic on the coronation menu. No chili either. Now, normally, a detail like that would mean nothing. But this is a family famous for one motto above all others. Never complain, never explain. So when Tom Parker Bowles casually explained it anyway, on a podcast, people listened closely. He said his mother avoided garlic because of how it affects your breath when you're meeting hundreds of people in a single day. He said she simply doesn't like chili, doesn't enjoy heavy spice. And then this line, almost thrown away, but somehow the most human thing said about that entire coronation. You have to be a little bit careful not to get the tummy too excited. That's it. That's the explanation. Not protocol. Not centuries of royal tradition. A woman thinking practically about how her own stomach will hold up during the longest day of her life. For one brief moment, the most heavily choreographed ceremony in modern British history came down to something as ordinary as not wanting to feel unwell in front of the entire world. And that's exactly the kind of detail Tom Parker Bowles has always been positioned to reveal. Close enough to know it. Distant enough from the institution to say it out loud without consequence. But while the public was focused on crowns and ceremony, Tom's own personal life had already moved through a complete chapter of its own, one that started with surprising timing. In 2005, just 1 month after his mother married Charles, Tom married fashion editor Sarah Baez. 1 month. 2 weddings, separated by only 4 weeks, both quietly reshaping what this family would look like going forward. Tom and Sarah welcomed their daughter, Lola, in 2007. Their son, Freddie, followed in 2010. For over a decade, they built a life together. A normal one, by most appearances, despite the family name attached to it. Then, in 2018, after 12 years of marriage, it ended. No scandal. No headline-grabbing drama splashed across tabloids for months on end. Just an ordinary divorce, the kind that happens to thousands of families every year. And here's what makes Tom Parker Bowles' response to it worth paying attention to. "I'm divorced," he said plainly, years later. "But you get on with your ex-wife for the sake of the children. That's what matters. No bitterness. No public dispute. Just a straightforward priority, stated without embellishment. My priority is to make sure my children are happy and safe and comfortable," he added. Just like any other divorced father. Just like any other divorced father. Think about how unusual that sentence actually is, coming from a man this close to the British monarchy. He's not describing royal duty. He's not describing institutional obligation. He's describing himself as ordinary. Deliberately. On purpose. And there's one more detail that completes this picture, one that brings the entire story full circle. Tom has spoken about how his children have adjusted to having King Charles as a step-grandfather. He doesn't describe distance, or formality, or the kind of careful royal etiquette you might expect. He describes warmth. His children, he says, adore their step-grandfather. He calls Charles a wonderful presence in their lives, a relationship built on genuine blended family closeness rather than royal obligation. So here's where all 8 chapters of this story finally meet. A man who got fired from job after job, with a famous mother who never once stepped in to rescue him. A man who waited 25 years before letting his name and his mother's name share a single book cover. A man who survived a tabloid scandal in his 20s, and years working for one of the most difficult employers in Britain, long before any of the comfort and polish we see in him today. A man who explained why there was no garlic at a coronation, simply because his mother didn't want an upset stomach in front of the world. A man who divorced quietly, prioritized his children without ever raising his voice publicly about it, and built a blended family that, by his own account, is full of warmth rather than tension. And a man who, when finally offered the one thing that could have made all of this effort unnecessary, a royal title, said no without hesitation. Not because he doesn't understand power. Because he understands exactly what it costs, and he has spent his entire adult life choosing something else instead. An ordinary name. A stable home for his children. A career built on 25 years of his own failures and his own recoveries, with nobody else's name doing the work for him. That's the real story behind the laugh, behind the joke about revolution, behind every headline that ever called him the Queen's son instead of simply Tom. He was never trying to avoid the crown out of fear. He was protecting something he built himself, one fired job, one honest book, one quiet divorce at a time. And in a family defined by duty, that quiet, deliberate choice might be the most unexpected story of all.